must learn from our past, our ancestors' ways. If they're up there in the stars, we must call them from the rain. In the summer of 2017, on the beautiful land of Maidu Territory, known today as the Sierra Nevadas, I was invited to participate in an opening ceremony at a retreat for women of color by sharing a spiritual practice from my own ancestral lineage. We had an indigenous woman call upon the four directions as our bodies were smudged with copal, an African-American elder who poured libations into the earth while giving thanks to the Orishas, and lastly, it would be my turn. I was honored to be invited, but to be honest, I was afraid of being caught as a total fraud. As an American-born citizen, what medicine do I have to offer from my ancestors? Do I recite the Buddhist chants I grew up with, even though I barely knew what they meant? Do I call my mom? Or should I Google how to connect with my ancestors? Yes, I Googled. And in not knowing what to do, I decided to do nothing by offering the gift of complete silence. But let's call it meditation to sound more spiritual, shall we? 10 minutes for us to simply reconnect with the land and our breath, coming to find in that moment it was exactly what the space needed. And would you believe, after the ceremony, in the middle of a California drought, it rained? You're welcome. Silence as a ritual to find clarity and connection amongst the noise in our search for belonging. So many people are looking for where it is they come from. We tend to believe that connecting with our ancestors means traveling back to the motherland, which I did do earlier that same year while studying plant medicine and womb healing from a traditional midwife in Thailand. In reclaiming these practices, I was sure that I was doing the work to make my ancestors proud. But in a country where I could barely speak the language, my mother tongue, let alone read or write, home was no longer a place, but a feeling I had to cultivate wherever I went. Have you ever traveled so far to find yourself, only to still feel lost when you arrived? My mother, a retired nurse, later told me that her grandmother was the village midwife, and that as a child, she would follow her around with a sarong, ready to catch a reincarnated ancestor running back to this realm through their mother's womb, while being lovingly surrounded by family. But don't have children, my mother would say. It only brings suffering. This made me understand why my mom preferred I become a Buddhist nun with my only vows to celibacy. Because unlike how she came into this world from the comfort of her mother's home with at least 40 days of rest to follow, I, on the other hand, was cut from her belly in a cold hospital room without any family by her bedside. And within 2 weeks, she was back working in the maternity unit of another hospital floor. What are the stories our mothers have withheld from us so that we wouldn't have to feel their pain? And are there areas in your life where you may be unknowingly carrying this burden while mistaking it for your own? As children of immigrants, many of us may not have grown up with hugs or kisses or hearing the words, "I love you." And in my household, Love was often expressed in the kitchen, as if every basil leaf and chili pepper was a joyful ancestor whose seeds planted new memories for us to create. And there was always enough food left over for the loved ones we imagined sitting beside us at the dinner table. Since then, I've learned to see cooking as a ritual, even if I've been guilty of buying red curry in a bottle from Trader Joe's. And it is not the same. And while I didn't fulfill my parents' American dreams of me becoming a nurse or a doctor, I'd like to believe that we are the descendants of healers who are reawakening to our gifts despite the generations we've been removed from our ancestral lineage. We are all being called to remember that healing goes beyond hospital visits and sage bundles or crystals, but is about transmuting the suffering of our past into joy and pleasure, even if it means literally going to the root of it, and allowing the work we are doing on ourselves to ripple out to all those around us. It's why my generation is feeling this pull to return, including to countries like Ghana that have recently opened their doors to welcome those of the African diaspora back home. And while everyone doesn't have the means of returning to their roots, whether it be due to displacement, immigration, finances, adoption, and other barriers, we are still finding ways to reconnect. From our deep belly breaths to laughter over shared meals, and even the creation of altars in our living space as the place to return to whenever we forget that we are never alone because our ancestors are guiding the way, as long as we are putting in the work to meet them at least halfway. My belief is that the more we take this time to cultivate a relationship with our ancestors, this would prevent so much suffering in the world. Because violence is often bred from those who lack a sense of spiritual security, so feel this need to claim someone else's territory as their own, such as the brutal history of colonization. Our practice must also include that we in this room are currently on occupied, stolen land of the Tongva people, because ancestors are not just of our bloodline either. Also, who are those of your cultural lineage who gave you the confidence to be you, who used their voice and spoke up in the face of injustice in a time where it was safest to remain silent out of fear of persecution for their identity, their gender, and beliefs? My ancestors include leaders like Yuri Kochiyama and Grace Lee Boggs, who taught me I don't have to be quiet and obedient, but I can be a loud, unfiltered, and unapologetic Asian American. Because our ancestors are those who we choose and strive to embody. So celebrate the ones to come, including the ancestors you are becoming. And while many people may believe in reincarnation, like myself, this doesn't give anyone the right to claim someone else's culture as their own, just because you may think you were Native American in your past life. Being born in this body means we get to excavate the narratives that have informed our current power and place in the world, while creating new stories of hope, resilience, and possibilities for the next generation without ignoring or spiritually bypassing the trauma it took to get here. So sit with that discomfort, including the noise that may make you believe you don't know what you're doing, and ask yourself in moments of doubt, what would I say as a future ancestor? Because after all, we are the ancestors we have been praying to reconnect with. I'd like for us to reflect on what your story medicine is as we take 3 breaths. The first is for the ones who came before us. The second is for the ancestors you are becoming. And third is for the ones who have yet to return.